Braves and baseball fans, it's time to take a trip from coast to coast across Major League Baseball.
There it goes, a long drive. If it stays fair, home run.
One strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed a perfect game.
Fly ball deep left center. Grissom on the run. Yes! 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 The Atlanta Braves have given you a championship. Listen to this crowd.
Left side, Swanson to first. Braves are world champions.
Braves and baseball talk, straight from the diamond. Here's Grant McAuley.
Hello and welcome to From the Diamond. As always, I am Grant McAuley, and this is the long-awaited post-trade deadline edition of the show. And unfortunately for the Atlanta Braves, it represents, at best, a mixed bag, and at worst, some real disappointment about the inability to add to one of the most important areas for any team, and that is the starting pitching, an area that the Braves have not only had to weather the storm and navigate throughout the 2026 season, but if you look back over the postseasons past from 2020 through 2024, those have been significant questions moving forward. And that's where the trade deadline comes into play, because this is the last real time to make the big moves that hopefully fortify your club, make you that much better, and prepare you for the war ahead in October. We're going to dive into what the Braves were able to do, and unfortunately, what they were unable to do on this edition of From the Diamond. But first, I want to remind you to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, leave a rating and a review. Those help me out immensely, and you can follow me on social media at Grant McAuley on most platforms. With that out of the way, let's dive in here. As we came into the trade deadline, there's really no question about what the Braves' needs were, and I think that I covered that in a list I posted on social media. I felt like they needed to add a right-hand hitting bat. I felt like they needed to add to the bullpen, and not to bury the lead, I felt like the Braves needed to add at least two veteran starting pitchers, two proven starting pitchers, guys that you could expect to get competitive innings out of, because I think the biggest problem for the Atlanta Braves, as the season has worn on, and continues to be an issue that I think they're going to have to manage moving forward, is can you get more innings out of your starting rotation? So with that in mind, as you look to the trade deadline and some of the ways that it was going to play out and the dominoes that were going to have to fall, there was no bigger domino than Tarik Skubal. And I know a lot of folks looking at the Braves and the farm system that has improved over the last year or two or maybe more, but definitely feels as stocked as it's been in recent memory. Would the Braves have the trade chips and the wherewithal to say, hey, we're going to go all in for a rental? I was just not convinced that was going to be the case. Now, was I going to rule it out? No. And I think that the Braves had a unique position that they could take on not only the prospect price, but also the payroll price, because there was, if you'll keep in mind, and I'm sure a lot of people remember this, the suspension of Jurickson Profar, which opened up a lot of money. So this was one of those unique times where the Braves were positioned perfectly, I felt like, to pay the prospect price if they could line up on that deal and absorb the payroll hit. And that's just not been the case at any trade deadline in recent memory for the Braves. Like Alex Anthopoulos has always said, he's not being told no for these moves, and a lot of times it's just the alignment of the deal. And I'll take that at face value because you're not trying to force trades, and I know that nobody really wants to necessarily dwell on that right now, but you're not looking to cut off your nose to spite your face when it comes to your prospects in your minor league system, but there is a balance to walk. And there is a line where I feel like you have to say, if we look at the major league level, what can we do to put this team over the top? Because every year there's going to be another draft, and every year there's going to be a time to sign international prospects. You get to restock that farm system. Can it be painful to trade away players that you've invested in and developed and that could become stars? Absolutely, but it's the gambit that is built into the trade deadline. And if we track this thing back a little bit further, and this is where I'm really just perplexed by the outcome of this particular trade deadline, Alex Anthopoulos spoke to the media dating all the way back to last winter, and I've heard it multiple times over the past at least 8 to 9 months, and that is, you'd like to get a playoff caliber starter, a guy that you could trust with innings in October. You've got Chris Sale, you've got other in-house candidates that you felt like could fill out your rotation, but that was the one need that he said, I would like to fill. And that need has persisted. It did not happen over the winter. Then a slew of injuries happened in the Braves pitching staff, to Spencer Schwellenbach, to Hurston Waldrop, to Spencer Strider. We don't know if we're going to see any of those three men again in 2026. Doesn't sound likely in the case of Waldrop. Sounds highly doubtful in the case of Strider. And Schwellenbach still has many miles to travel before he could be back, and that would only be at some point late in the season. So it doesn't address your need. And that need was not only pointed out by the media, reporters who cover the team, the fans who watch the team on an everyday basis, but the general manager himself, the president of baseball operations, said this is what we would like to attain. This is what we feel like we need. This would be the ideal addition. Now, that statement has a couple of different applications. Explicitly, you've said what you'd like to have and what you feel like you need. Implicitly, over the coming months of the winter and at the trade deadline, that expectation has been created for those who are following the team and watching the team and cheering for the team that that's the kind of move that the club is looking to make. So when it doesn't happen, it only amplifies the disappointment of not getting that deal done, of not seeing that door open and that capable veteran starter, somebody that you could picture down the stretch and in October to come in and give you valuable innings. And I'll track this back to the start of June because this has been a problem for quite some time. The Braves starting rotation is averaging around 5 innings per start. They are not getting deep enough into the game, which is creating more stress on the bullpen, which is creating more appearances for high-leverage guys, which is putting Walt Weiss in a position where he's trying to get as many outs as he can out of some of the middle innings relievers, and it's created an incredible amount of roster churn. And the roster churn may be inevitable. It may just be part of baseball in 2026. But the big thing that I look at is if the rotation can find a way to improve the number of innings that it's throwing, it will start to take that stress off that bullpen. And Walt Weiss has said this over the past few weeks is, I'm trying to keep my high-leverage guys in my bullpen upright so that we get down the stretch and get to October and they're gassed up and ready to go. Now, once you get to October, and Alex Anthopoulos did talk about this, and I'm not going to tell you that I disagree with it, you can utilize the bullpen, and you can be more aggressive with how many innings your bullpen throws. It's not the traditional, we're expecting the starter to come in and throw 6 or 7 or more innings in a playoff start. Would it be nice? Is it the way that I remember playoff baseball being, that you'd have that dominant starting pitcher who'd come in and basically take over that game and basically put down the staff and say, you shall not pass to the opposing offense? Yeah, and I would love for that to be the case. I would love to see that, and I think every team would love to have a pitcher or two that could come in October and be that guy. But we also saw in 2021 that you don't have to have the number 1, number 2, number 3 starter all going deep into the game. You can make things work with a bullpen that is capable of doing exactly what the night shift did. And I talked about this over the past couple of days in some of the calls that I've done on 92.9 The Game about what 2021 looked like. When you entered that postseason, you had the veteran Charlie Morton, you had a very capable Cy Young contender in Max Fried, and you had the up-and-comer Ian Anderson, who were all making starts for the Braves in the playoffs. Then you had to figure a lot of things out because as you went on, and by the time you got to the World Series, Charlie Morton broke his leg, and the bullpen became a bigger and bigger factor into how the Braves were going to win that World Series. Now, they made it happen. But if you flash back to what that bullpen was throughout the 2021 season, there were plenty of questions. I think A.J. Minter and Tyler Matzik were probably the two most reliable relievers heading into the playoffs. Luke Jackson had his moments, but for the most part, he was getting the job done. But then there was a closer. There was Will Smith, who most people were looking at and thinking, I'm not sure I want to get on this ride every single night. Now, all Will Smith did was roll through the 2021 playoffs and not give up a run. And sometimes it was a smoke and mirrors act, but those were his final numbers. But you had Matzik, and you had Minter, and you had Luke Jackson, in particular, that night shift group, propping up a rotation that oftentimes was not able to get beyond the 6th inning if it was able to get there. When it comes to the Braves' playoff run, 2021 in most ways is the outlier. Winning the World Series for a team, let's face it, that is typically the outlier. You can't expect to do that every single year. You can hope for it, you can plan for it, you can compete for it, but it's not always the outcome. But if you look at the common thread between the 2020, the 2021, the 2022, the 2023, and the 2024 Braves who all made the playoffs, they all had starting pitching issues. Whether it was Max Fried or Spencer Strider or Charlie Morton or even Chris Sale, some of their best pitchers were not available to them by the time you get to the playoffs. And I understand, and I will stipulate, you cannot prevent injuries at the wrong time to the wrong players that will impede you from being able to make your October run and win the World Series. I understand that completely. But the levels of depth is what really stands out to me as the way to try to combat losing some of your best arms at a bad time. And that, I think, is what really leads us back to the idea of the Braves need a starting pitcher, a veteran pitcher that you could turn to in October and say, take us as deep into the game as you can. Give us quality, competitive innings. Keep us in it. We'll get the bullpen going behind you. We'll get the offense going. We'll try to win a game. We'll try to win a series. And we'll try to head on and be the last team standing by the time the playoffs are over. And I think that's really the root of the heightened expectations around this trade deadline. It's the obvious desire of the players and of the fans to win the World Series, but the moves that have to be made, those are in the hands of the team, in the hands of the front office. And the trade deadline, it represented the biggest and best opportunity during the season, being able to take an inventory of what you have and what you don't have, of how you've played at your best, of how you've played at your worst, and decide what things do I need to just make this next couple of months and the hopeful trip to October the best it can possibly be, to prepare, if you will. It's like the old saying, when did Noah build the ark? Well, before the rain, and it felt like the rain that has come for the Braves, that has been raining on their parade, and oftentimes keeping a parade from happening in October, has been frequent injuries to starting pitchers and the lack of having the depth that you need and the arms that you can turn to help give you your best chance to win playoff series and make that deep October run. Again, 2021 was the outlier because the Braves, they made it happen. They won the World Series. It's not going to happen every single year. I don't know if I need to really say it out loud, but I'll go ahead and do it anyway. That is what makes it special. But the preparation and the roster construction and the things you can do as a team to put the best 26 players out on the field to do it, some of that will come down to how were you able to make the team better at the trade deadline. The Braves added some good complementary pieces, but they missed in an area that I feel like could come back to haunt them, and that is simply getting competitive innings from another starting pitcher or two, nothing against Tyler Mahle, but starting pitchers who have October experience and could really help you in that department if you're going to get there and have success. You just want to feel like you brought the best version of the team to the table in order to have the success, the outcome that you want to have. And I'm just not sure we can say that because the Braves rotation has been beset by injuries. Chris Sale is an unquestioned ace, a Cy Young contender, a future Hall of Famer. After him, everybody has either been through it with injuries and inconsistency, and I understand because I watched the Braves in the 1990s. The starting rotation doesn't guarantee you a World Series either, but I'd much rather go into October knowing that I've got some pitchers, plural, that I can count on to at least get us started. And I'm just not sure that the Braves can look around and take an inventory and say, these are the starting pitchers that give us the best chance to win that are not named Chris Sale. I don't know who those guys are right now. Now, Alex Anthopoulos was not going to lay out the pitching plans for the Braves in the Wild Card Series or the National League Division Series or the NLCS or the World Series in the first week of August because the Braves have to get there first. But there was a glaring need, and that need was pointed out dating all the way back to last winter when Alex Anthopoulos said we would like to get a playoff caliber starting pitcher, a frontline starter that we can have throw meaningful innings for us in October. That pitcher has not walked through the door. That move has not been made. That trade did not happen at the trade deadline. Now, I do want to address at least one of the reports that has come out there. Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic has really been kind of at the root of the reporting that Jacob deGrom of the Texas Rangers was not willing to waive his no-trade clause. There's a lot of conversation about the Braves wanting to acquire deGrom, the Rangers saying we will facilitate that trade to the Braves, and deGrom saying, look, I don't want to go anywhere. I'm not waiving my no-trade clause. And that sounds like whether it was Atlanta or anywhere else, Jacob deGrom was not motivated to uproot and start a new chapter of his career. He signed a multiple-year deal with the Rangers. He's already won a World Series there. And players put these provisions in their contracts for a reason so that they can decide whether they stay or whether they go. There's not a whole lot Alex Anthopoulos can do beyond that other than to pursue other starting pitching candidates. And when you see the returns for whether it was Casey Mize or Robbie Ray or a slew of other pitchers that were on the market or changed addresses, it's just kind of baffling that the Braves, with their farm system, weren't able to at least facilitate a deal for a proven starting pitcher to add to Tyler Mahle, to fortify the Braves starting rotation, to give them more quality innings down the stretch, which could take strain off the bullpen, which could give that bullpen a little bit of extra run if they're not having to cover 3 2/3, 4 2/3, or sometimes 5 innings per night. I just think that's an untenable ask for this bullpen moving forward, and on nights Chris Sale doesn't pitch, the Braves have really not been able to figure that out. Now, if you look at the stats and the indicators on the Braves starting rotation, yes, they are a top 10 club in Major League Baseball in ERA. They are top 5 in the National League by that metric. where I start to look and where I start to wonder about how the Braves are built to get through the final 2 months and through October is Atlanta is 17th in innings pitched by its starting rotation for the season. Now let's go back to June the 1st. Since June the 1st, the Braves ranked 26th in Major League Baseball in innings from its starting rotation. And when we start talking about rotational ERA since June the 1st, so this is taking in the Braves' worst month of the season, Atlanta is 21st in ERA by its rotation at 4.63. That doesn't exactly sound like an indicator of future success. And let me throw this in there because we've talked about this quite a bit here on From the Diamond. Imagine those numbers without Chris Sale, who was just named Pitcher of the Month for July and has been having another career-type season. Without Chris Sale, those numbers are alarming and would plummet both in innings pitched and ERA down toward the bottom of Major League Baseball over the past 2 months. That's June and July. So if we want to talk about the 4-month sample size of the season for the Braves starting rotation, the first couple of months went well enough. They were able to overcome some injuries. The last couple of months have not gone well enough, and outside of Chris Sale, it is fair to wonder what kind of answers the Braves have. Are they going to get some unsung performances from a Martin Perez or a Bryce Elder or perhaps some other pitchers at times? Sure. But that has become more of the exception than the rule for starts made by anybody other than Chris Sale. Now, since June the 1st, Atlanta ranks 11th in bullpen innings. They've turned in a 3.82 ERA on the whole, so it's been pretty quality relief. That is right in line with what the Milwaukee Brewers are getting from their bullpen. So it is fair to say the Braves are not the only contender that's going through this, but the Braves, knowing their need to get more innings out of their starting rotation, at least for the final couple of months, and possibly with an eye towards October, depending on who they got, were not able to really check that box and bring in reinforcements in that very crucial area. So now we're going to hear from Alex Anthopoulos as he did talk to the media after the trade deadline. I'll get to the 30,000-foot view in a moment, but my first question to him was about the balance of innings between the rotation, which hasn't been able to give quite enough, and the bullpen, which has had to give more than enough over the past couple of months, and how to reinforce that entire pitching staff with an eye on October.
Well, we talked a lot about, you're going to expand the roster come beginning of September, right? So in a lot of instances, Grant, like you talked about, we've churned, right? We've had to really move guys up and down, move guys through. And that's just to protect guys, right? Just if a game's out of reach or if we have a big lead, we get to save guys. It'll help, look, we have the limits with the rules. The 13 and the 13, that's going to change come September. So, look, we're very well aware of what we have ahead of us, the stretch of games. So we do have to navigate the month of August for sure. A guy like Suter, with the strike throwing and the ability to cover bulk and pitch almost every day, you'll look at his game log. He'll throw an inning. The next day, he'll throw 2. And then you guys know we always value this stuff. Just the clubhouse impact, the way he goes about it. We just think he's a perfect fit for our bullpen for some of those things, right? So, but look, it's something that we've absolutely talked through in terms of guys coming back from the IL, how things are going to go. And then once you get to September, I think just the one more added arm with the roster would make a world of difference for us, but we have to get there. And I think you remember in 2024, just going into the break, Chris Sale was getting a lot of extra rest. And then coming out of the break in August, we were in a tough spot. And we started going just 5-man rotation and not doing rest and so on. And I think it caught up to a lot of the guys, right? We had it happen before with Kyle Wright and Fried and some of the other guys. So we're aware of it. And we have talked about how to map out and game plan through the month of August to get to September.
Now, obviously, the Braves were able to fill some of their needs. They did get Lane Thomas. They did get Brent Suter. They did get Tyler Mahle. All of those are useful pieces that the Braves can fortify that 26-man roster with, to use that word again, to fortify. They're also getting 2 players back from the injured list. Ha-Seong Kim and Sean Murphy are both rejoining the big league club, and the Braves had to cut loose a handful of pieces. Eli White was traded to the Boston Red Sox for a pitching prospect. Backup catcher Joey Bart was traded to the Chicago White Sox for some pitching depth, and speedy infielder Jorge Mateo was designated for assignment to clear a spot for Kim. With Jim Jarvis holding down a lot of the shortstop duties and Kim coming back, the Braves did not feel they could carry a third player who's a primary shortstop on their roster, and Mateo was the odd man out. Now, the focus of this trade deadline, and the focus really all the way back to last winter, as we talked about, has been on adding a starting pitcher who could help anchor the rotation and pitch meaningful innings in October. And Alex Anthopoulos was asked if missing out on that made this an unsuccessful trade deadline.
How disappointing is it to walk away from here and not add a playoff caliber starter?
We did not go into the deadline with, hey, we have to get this, have to get that. We're just trying to make the team better. So you don't look at it that way because, like I mentioned before, a few years ago we could have gotten one of the elite starters in the game, but Drake Baldwin would have been going out the door. So not to say those are easy decisions. You obviously you'd like to get deals done. You find a way, but there's certain asks that you say yes to, and those are the deals that you do, and certain ones that you say no to. So in past years, there's been guys like Harris you get asked about when he's in A-ball and he's in Rome, and you say no. So you're always trying to manage the short term and the long term. So you go into these things with how can we make the team better. And is there something that you think is the right thing for the organization to do?
Are you comfortable with the pitching staff you have in place?
Yes.
With the depth?
Yes.
Why so?
Since the All-Star break, I think we've been fifth in ERA in MLB. First 2 months of the season, we were top 5 in ERA. Obviously, in the middle, we weren't. Does that mean you're not looking to get better? Absolutely. In all areas. Bullpen, offense, rotation, yes. But you're managing short-term, long-term, and you're going to do what you feel is best for the club. And you're not going to force a deal. So, we said no to a lot of things, and that's not easy to do, but you have to do what you feel is right for the organization.
Alex, are you better than you were yesterday? And if so,
Yes.
How?
We added players to the big league roster that we felt we improved the club. We got a really good team. I mean, we're in first place. We're playing really well out of the break. Our offense has come back to life. We've pitched like we did early in the year. We had a rough June. There's no doubt about that. But the way we're playing coming out of the break has been great. And we feel like with the guys we added, we made the club stronger.
Hey, Alex, considering the strength of the Braves farm system, how do you evaluate the decision to just, add Tyler Mahle when, you see other teams like the Padres who have significantly less than you guys acquire much more?
I don't understand that question. It just, the way you worded that just doesn't make any sense. So we'll see how Tyler Mahle does.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have your thoughts and your opinions, and that's great. And obviously, like I said the other day when you'd asked me, we're going to find out, obviously, in a month or two or whatever it is. Our farm system, yeah, it's strong. I totally agree with you. That's one thing I do agree with you on. It is strong. People asked about a lot of our top players, and there's a bunch that we made available for certain players that we felt were impact, difference-making guys. And then there were other times that we were asked for some of those guys that we said no. So what any one club does not impact us, right? So you pointed out one specific team. I have all the respect in the world for that team. We have teams in our division. We're trying to win the division, obviously make the postseason. We've never reacted to what teams do around us. We have to do what's right for us, and we've always operated that way. We're aware of it, no doubt. We're aware of what everyone's doing. We respect what everyone's doing, but I don't think in any sports job you can say this team did X, so we better go do X. It's just, there's so many examples. Stuff like that doesn't work. You have to worry about yourself.
Now, the other question I had for Alex Anthopoulos was in specific. It was about A.J. Smith-Shawver, somebody who I've talked about on the show, somebody that we saw last week, a very talented young arm, coming off Tommy John surgery, returning in basically 13 months, and the role that he could play down the stretch. Now, my curiosity and my concern are about how many innings you can ask from a pitcher coming off Tommy John surgery and returning midway through a season. How much workload can you put on him? How much can you ask of him? So I wanted to get the thoughts of Alex Anthopoulos on how exactly they're going to manage Smith-Shawver and what role he could play. So here's my question to Alex Anthopoulos. I want to ask about A.J. Smith-Shawver. We saw him come back. You've talked about navigating these innings over the final couple of months. Obviously, he's a high upside arm, but coming back from Tommy John, I know in the past you haven't wanted to talk about innings limits and things like that. Maybe it's something you guys keep internal. I'm sure you're clocking all of it, but what is the plan for him? Where does he fit? And what's the realistic expectation for him to make an impact over the final couple of months and maybe into October?
Yeah, so look, he pitched well enough to stay. And the issue was being used in a doubleheader as a 27th man. You know, he went back and he was now optioned for the first time, and now you're in the 2-week limit. But and it was strictly because he wasn't going to be available for the next 4 days. He was going to be out the next 4 days. And we had a 4-game series with the Washington Nationals, one of the best offenses in the game, and then going into the off day. So we knew if we kept him, he wasn't available until the next week. And that just did with playing the doubleheader, it felt like that wasn't the right move and the smart move. But performance-wise, he absolutely earned the right to stay. It's just we were going to be short. So no, there's not a limit. We take it like with all these guys day by day, sides, how they're feeling, things like that stuff. We monitor that, but I just don't think there's a formula that says this percentage and so on. I've tried it as a young GM. I don't think anyone solved it. Even in LA and so on, no one's really solved that. So we continue to watch it. I expect him to be a part of this again because of the 2 weeks, barring an IL. He's likely to get at least 2 more starts down in Gwinnett. I believe he's starting tomorrow. So just because of the nature of being down you can only come back on day 16. He'll get a minimum of 2 unless there's an IL and he was to come back sooner. But our goal is to get him at least 2 more, and then he'll be eligible to come back, and we'll see where we're at on all this.
Now, with regard to the deal that did not work for Jacob deGrom, that was a name that came up. That was a question that came up as far as his no-trade clause being invoked and a deal to the Braves being blocked. I did not expect that to be a question that was going to give us a lot of detail because, unfortunately, general managers can't really speak about players on other teams in a public fashion, and those comments are oftentimes going to be guarded until years after the fact if we ever hear about it at all. But here's what Anthopoulos had to say regarding a potential deal with the Texas Rangers for Jacob deGrom and that no-trade clause.
You were asking earlier if a high asking price got in the way of a trade effort. Can I ask a slightly amended version of that question? Did a no-trade clause get in the way of any effort today?
You should be a lawyer. It's a great question. Just trying to think how I answer this question.
I was careful not to mention any names.
Yeah. No, I would have all the respect in the world. There are various reasons why deals don't get done, and it's probably the same, it's not appropriate for me to discuss deals that didn't get done. Sorry for the lame answer.
Oh, I had to try.
Yeah.
There was a lot more that was discussed throughout that media teleconference regarding roster construction and some of the other things. The pursuit of a top starter was really the number one thing. The fact that many starting pitchers were traded to many other contenders and the Braves really weren't able to get one of those bigger names, one of those more proven arms, and to check a box that Anthopoulos himself had pointed out last winter was something the Braves very much would like to do. That was a big part of the discussion, as was some of the roster construction and some of the moving parts the Braves had over the last 24 hours. So as we come out of the trade deadline, I understand there's a lot of fan frustration, and I think it's justifiably so. The Braves have been in pursuit of some pitching reinforcements and have had serious questions and injuries they've had to deal with once again throughout the season in 2026, and getting those reinforcements felt like it would be a key piece in the run to October, if not their October success in general. Over the next couple of months, we'll find out if this Braves team, which, again, is in first place, does have a sizable lead in the National League East, and does appear poised to go back to October, if this club and the best 26 players they can put together can have that run through October and win another World Series. Over the next couple of months, we'll also be seeing how all of these other contenders and their acquired players are going to perform, and we'll see how soon, how quickly hindsight might creep in for some of the deals the Braves were unable to do. As with any trade, you have to understand the value of the prospects and the importance of making the deals you believe in. I just find it hard to believe that there wasn't something that the Braves could cobble together that could just give them more innings, more quality innings, even if it's not the biggest name, even if you're not landing Tarek Skubal. It just felt like there was so much meat on the bone at this trade deadline, and the Braves came away with, as far as their rotational concerns, with table scraps. That's going to do it for this edition of From the Diamond. I wish it could have been a much more fun discussion, especially considering the team is having a successful season and you were just hoping to get that much better around this time of year. The Braves have just under 2 months to go before October arrives, and some very meaningful baseball out in front of us. I hope you'll continue to come back right here to From the Diamond, which you can find wherever you get your podcast. You can also hear the show on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game in Atlanta on Sundays throughout baseball season. And you can follow me on social media at Grant McAuley on most platforms. The Braves get back to work against the Miami Marlins this week. The New York Yankees await them on the weekend, and then we'll be back at it on From the Diamond in just a few days. So that's a wrap for this edition of the show. Until next time, I'm Grant McAuley. So long, everyone.